All right, you are live.
Hello and welcome everybody to our weekly episode of What's the Tea? My name is Lysandra Hutchinson and I'm back this week with another episode. I am the Community Resource Specialist here at ANEW. And we have a very special guest with us today. I'm so excited to get a chance to interview her. If you've been with us this month, you know that we're talking about Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this is the month of October, which we are honoring domestic violence awareness. And we chose this month to really shed light on different types of abuse. We talk about the types of abuse all the time, but we rarely get a chance to really unpack them. So we wanted to take this month to really look at the different types of abuse, to unpack them, give greater detail to what they are and how they impact survivors of domestic violence. And so today we get a chance to really hear from someone who's walked through this. And not just someone that's walked through it, but someone who found our services as a major part of their support and a major part of their process. So we're excited to hear in detail about her healing process and her life after domestic violence and how she has thrived since that time. So Reba, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you just, go ahead and just introduce yourself. And I think we should I'm going to let you do this because I know you know what to do. So I'm going to let you, if you could just introduce yourself and just tell us who you are and a little bit about where you were 13 years ago when you found ANEW, which at the time was called South Suburban Family Shelter.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for having me. Hi, guys, on Facebook Live. Like she said, my name is Reba Bell. I am an author, a speaker, and a coach. I also am a mother and a wife. So I have 2 kids. I've been married going on 7 years. And I'm actually here to just explain my story and just to empower other people. Like I said, I'm a coach. So I have a coaching business that I coach people that are survivors of domestic violence. And I coach people to get their lives back on track, how they can change their mindset. And I also coach them on healing from the trauma of the past.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So we knew you were perfect for today because I didn't mention this up front, but we're finishing off this series with resiliency. That's really the topic and the focus of today is to highlight the resiliency of domestic violence survivors and just what goes into it, because it's no easy process, right? To heal and recover and then have to start over again. So it takes a lot of resiliency to be able to do that, a lot of strength to be able to do that. So we really wanted to highlight that today. So you're a coach now.
Yes.
That's amazing in and of itself. When you first found our agency, which was South Suburban Family Shelter at the time, can you tell us, I know you said that was 13 years ago, where were you or what were you going through right before you found us?
Okay, so I was in a relationship with my son's father. And at that time, when I found you guys, my son was 3 weeks. So just imagine, I was going through this while I was pregnant.
Wow.
Imagine I was going through this for, I think we was together 1.5 years. And
wow.
And the abuse started as verbal, then it was like physical. And at that time, I didn't have a real good relationship with my family, my mom. I think everybody didn't like my son's father at that time.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, at that time, I didn't know about the signs of the isolation and he's taking you away and different aspects of domestic violence.
Yeah.
But for us, it was like, I felt like I didn't have anybody. Nobody knew his family or my family. And we was like really close niche, but nobody knew I was getting abused. And like I said, it started from small things to bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the abuse really kept happening, it was just like continuously every day, just because I left something on the floor, we'll argue or something like that, and the abuse just really started happening. That's when I started realizing, okay, I got to get out of this. But then you start thinking, okay, we live together and I have nobody to go to and I'm pregnant. Okay. So it's like, I got to stay in this. Okay. What am I going to do? I always see myself being more than what I was in that situation, but still in that situation, I had low self-esteem. I didn't know myself. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't have the confidence in that nobody would look at me as of what he kept telling me. And what I kept hearing. And so when it did happen, and the last straw was, and I say it's by God, my story is in the book, but when God woke me up at 5 a.m. and my son was 3 weeks and told me to leave. It was just after a real bad night, and we had an argument. He abused me. I went upstairs and I was just crying. And it was at this point I was just like, I'm just tired of this. I need to leave. Mind you, I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. Wow. But I had ended up losing my job when I was pregnant with my son. And it was not really losing it, but when they found out I was pregnant, I had to go on permanent bed rest. So that was like added on to it. So I couldn't work. So then I just had my child. It wasn't time for me to go back to work. And he was the only person that was literally taking care of me. So I was in like a catch-22. Where do I go? How do I leave? All I knew is I needed to leave because it kept happening. And now I'm looking at a 3-week-old baby like, I don't want this to keep happening. I can't. I knew that my strength was my child. I did. That's the only thing I did know at that time. And so once I had my son, it was just like, I gotta leave. Didn't know where I was going. And the guy woke me up, gave me a dream, and told me I was going to get killed, and gave me a vivid dream of shooting me and killing me. Yeah. And I woke up in a, you wake up in a frenzy, and I woke up in a frenzy like, okay, I gotta go. Yeah. And this night, it was just something about this night. Every time we argued or fought or whatever, he usually come upstairs in the bed. He didn't come upstairs in the bed this night, so I'm scared now. So I'm like, where is he in this house? And I guess he ended up sleeping in another room. And I touched my son, and my son had a fever. So it was just like, hindsight, I'm looking back and saying, all of this is God. Wow. Moved me out the situation. My son had a fever, and he's 3 weeks. Of course, as a mother, you're like, okay, I'm getting a car, but I got to tell him that we got to go to the hospital. Make a long story short, we had another argument, and I went downstairs, and he was downstairs, and I told him that, we got to go to the hospital. He's sick, and he got a fever, and he just went off. And it went from one thing to another we end up, I remember the occurrence happening of him abusing me. It probably only happened 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Because I was getting beat up downstairs and trying to run away and the whole shenanigans of that. And end up calling the police. End up going at this time, we was living in Indiana. And I ended up calling the police. Police came, everything, and they took pictures, and it was like, she's beat up pretty bad. And at that time, my face on one side was purple and blue. I didn't know. I just was like, the adrenaline was rushing through you. And all I knew is I had my child right there. That's all my comfort was, that I needed my child. That's literally what I was trying to get back upstairs to, my child. Right. And went through that whole system and went through the process. And when we went through the hospital, he went to jail. And when I went into the hospital, they was like, it's somewhere you can go. And they end up telling me, they were like, where are you from? And I'm like, Illinois. And I end up getting referred to, they transported me from after I healed, because I come to find out, me and my son both had pneumonia. Didn't know it. That's why I say it was God. Wow. We had pneumonia, and it kept us in the hospital, I think probably like a week and a half. Right before Christmas. I was in the hospital for Christmas. Wow. So it was just a whole shenanigans. New Year's or whatever, because I think I got out, and it was like snow all over the ground, and it was just like different when I went in. It was just the whole different world. And they end up sending me to South Suburban Family Shelters. and it was
Wow.
the domestic violence shelter because I was from Illinois, so they was putting me in my area. And I'm telling you, once I got into that program, hindsight looking back, it was a blessing. But at the time, I felt like I didn't want to be there. I didn't know myself. I didn't know where I wanted to be. I was insecure, like I said before. And it was more like, why am I here? You know, I was angry. I hated him. Had to learn to forgive again.
Yeah.
And the program in itself was so, it was just such a powerful impact because the people that I encountered from the shelter to South Suburban Family Shelters, then they put you in a program and help you get you on your feet. It was, and so I started becoming this resilience, like you were saying. I'm starting to feel myself again. Oh, I could be a woman again. I can be independent again. So South Suburban Family Shelters kind of led me to where I am at today, to feel like I had the independence of being who I was before I got in that relationship.
Wow.
It helped me, the therapy I had got, the counseling I got, the relationships I absolutely built. You know, and one thing I did learn at that time, because it was just my boyfriend, it was women in there that was married. And I'm young at that time, and I'm sitting there like, married? You going through this when you married? Not knowing, you know, at that time. Like, and it was women that was going back to their abusers, that they was coming to us telling us that they didn't make it and they not coming back, you know. And I mean, going through the whole thing, and it was like, so the experience from going through the process was an up and down roller coaster, but I'm so glad that I actually pushed forward and did it.
Wow. So overall, how long were you in the relationship with
I was in a relationship with my son's father a year and a half.
Year and a half. Wow. So last week we had our executive director on, and we talked about this issue of how sometimes people don't understand all the different barriers to leaving. You mentioned it. I mean, you really did amazing at breaking it down. You're 3 weeks pregnant. You're financially dependent, you know, you don't have a car, you're isolated from your family. We literally broke all this down last week. So I love that you're telling your story so people can really hear it from someone that's been there. I think sometimes we get questions where people say, you know, they act like, well, this is common sense. If you're being harmed, well, just pick up and go. And they don't understand it's so multi-layered. It's more complicated than that. It's more complicated. And there's fear. There's fear of leaving too. So I mean, that's this, like the way that you're breaking this down, I think really helps people just have understanding of how it feels when you're in it. The abusive partners also purposely isolate you. From your family and friends. So when you found South Suburban Family Shelter, which is for those of you guys that don't know, we are formerly South Suburban Family Shelter, right? But we're the new name is Anew. And at the time, what services exactly did you access?
So the program at that time was you stayed in the shelter 3 months. And they let you break it down. They broke down the whole process. So you have to stay in the shelter. You have to get therapy. Of course, you was in a protective mechanism, meaning they kept you there. You had a curfew. You had to follow the rules. You did tours in the shelter, but you had roommates. You can be out of your room and you can do things, but it was more of them trying to get you back to the mindset of we communing together and y'all feed off each other. So the relationships that I built in the shelter was beautiful, because it was just like, okay, I'm in here with people that's like me. And at the time I was like, okay, my counselor in the shelter at that time was a lady named Kathy Blackwell, and she still works, and she lives in Georgia, but she works in the domestic violence arena now. And then the transition from that, they put you in if you pass the program, and then they put you in the transitional home where you start over and you get on your feet. And you still have counseling. One thing I did like, they kept you in that area where they transitioned you and they felt like it made you comfortable. And this is where I end up meeting Carol, the director. Now, I was still going through counseling, and it was like when I met her, she personally made me comfortable. It wasn't a judgment zone. I didn't feel like somebody was judging me. Like, you're just here, okay, let's hurry up and get this done and over with and tell me your story. Okay. It felt like, when I came in there, I felt like it was family. I felt like she made me believe that where I'm at today. She made me see the 13 years ago.
Wow.
Where I'm at. And that's what I want to impart on people. The feeling that I got sitting in that, even though I'm just a coach, I'm not a therapist. It's just a totally different thing. But the feeling that I got, I can get out of this. I can overcome this. I can love again. Those factors. I can actually tell my story and not be ashamed of it. So many times we talk about domestic violence, and people are so ashamed to talk about domestic violence. It's quieted in the church, mostly. It's quiet in our households. Don't tell what's going on in your house. And all we're doing to our kids or to ourselves is we bring it adverse childhood trauma. I'm sure you guys know about ACEs. I work with an organization. ACEs Matter. And we're talking about the adverse childhood traumas of what happened to you in your past. We address why you chose the mate you chose and why you attracted the person you attracted, and it's not your fault. And what happened to you. So we dig deep, and it made me feel like I can do this. Okay. I don't have to get back in another relationship. And if I do, I can know the signs and I can get out of it quicker. Because 9 times out of 10, we go into things, and after I talk about this in my book too, a long time I did what I was talking about, and I had to realize I still had a victim mindset because I was still in it. Because I was out of that situation. I got in other relationships, even in my marriage. And I talk about how me and my husband separated so many times because I kept on saying, this ain't gonna happen to me again. So I was still in the victim mindset and not addressing what actually my happiness was and what I was actually in the situation. So I was still converting back to my child, to my when my son was a baby, what couldn't happen to me. And so sometimes when we get out of a situation, out of a domestic violence situation or trauma altogether, we still have a victim mindset where we on the defense and we're not letting ourselves be open enough to allow people, whether it's friends or family or loved ones or relationships, to open us back up.
So how did you take your guards down? First of all, how did you begin to recognize that you were maybe projecting the past partner's behavior onto your new partner? How did you come to that? And then how did you stop doing that?
It came about with my husband. I noticed it came about with my husband because my husband, if anybody meet my husband, he's a big guy and he's such a teddy bear. But it was me kind of being emotionally abusive to him and trying to, like, if we have a debate or argument, it's like, don't yell at me because you're yelling at me. And it was like, okay, I just, we're having an argument.
We're just having a normal argument,
And it was still making me on the defense because I wasn't really living in the situation and experiencing I was so still scared of what if this happens again.
You're hyper vigilant because of the trauma that you experienced before. Absolutely.
So things did happen in our relationship, and it got to a point, in fact, we separated 3 times, and it was the 3rd time of the separation. I had to sit there and say, Reba, I need you to realize. It was like God was talking to me. I don't know if people believe in God, but my Holy Spirit really set me down and said, I need you to realize you're going to tear yourself up. It has nothing to do with your husband per se. But if you don't get out of that mindset, that negative mindset, you're not going to be happy with anybody. I had a lot of anger still that I was projecting to my friends and my family anger all the time. It's like you could just say something and I just like nah, 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 nah. And it's like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't know I was projecting because I was still on the fence. I was bringing up, I would say you have a trigger, and certain triggers remind you of things. And it could be not even a physical situation. Somebody could talk to you in a certain way.
Yeah.
It reminds you of things.
Yep.
I talk about, I want to bring that up because I talk about when I wrote my book. I talk about my mother being my first abuser, and I didn't realize it until I wrote my book. See, I thought my son's father was my first abuser, and it was my mom.
Okay.
And my mother wasn't physically abusive to me. She was verbally and emotional abuse. And as you know, most of the times, 9 times out of 10, it's worse.
Yeah.
Because it carries on.
Yep.
It carries on to other relationships. So a lot of those relationships I was telling you about, a lot of people couldn't understand why I was so angry. Why I was so in the defense every time they said something, or if they tried to correct me on something, it was more like, you're trying to control me.
Right.
And so I had to learn with self-evaluation, therapy, those mechanisms. I had to learn to get out of that and to see myself where I wanted to see myself. And I'm not still where I'm at now, because I tell everybody that I talk to and when I go live, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
But I'm much more happier, and I'm more aware of things that happen to me and other people that I want to help.
Absolutely.
And to not go through what I went through and have to go that far.
This is amazing that you bring this up, because this is why, we offer counseling at ANEW. We offer counseling to those that have experienced domestic violence at any time in your life. It could have been 5 years, 20 years ago, because, as you're saying, Reba, the impacts that are left as a result of trauma are long lasting. And sometimes you don't even know that they're there until you're in another relationship or some new context. And then you see that it's something still lingering, that there's like a leftover residue in trauma responses that still needs to be worked through. So I love that you're saying that, because it just validates the fact that there may still be a need for counseling, and it's never too late. It's never too late to go back and get the help that you need. Even if those responses are emotional, if you see them coming out in your relationship, sometimes we see the impact of trauma on people, their physical health. They've gotten sick, or they're having chronic headaches. They can't sleep well. They have anxiety and depression, and it may be years down the road. So it's never too late to seek that help, even if it's from a past relationship that you're not in anymore. So that's a great example of that. Can I ask how, when you wrote your book, well, no, let me go back to this point. I think that you said when you talked to Carol, so Carol Giselle, who's our, director of programs here at ANEW, was Reba's first Reba was her first client when she was counselor here. And you said something so powerful. You said she helped you see the life that you could have 13 years down the road, right? When you couldn't see it. Yep. That's really powerful.
In a situation in a situation that's sensitive as domestic violence, let's put it like that, we know that we all go in there and we be like, I don't want to be here. You're not in. Let's jump right in and heal me. Let's be real. We're not. We're more on they're going to judge me. Why am I here? And so you're on the defense. She made me feel so comfortable to tell my story and not be in the judgmental state, but to actually help me to see, like I said, to see myself where I'm at now, to help other people, to help other women, to help other men to go through that. You don't have to stay in that state. And just self-evaluation. A lot of times it's just more self-evaluation and your mindset of where you at and where you want to see yourself. And that's mostly what I coach on. I coach on the self-evaluation and the mindset, because we can't start nowhere, and you can't get help if you don't self-evaluate. And it's not saying that the situation is your fault, because I say that. I'll talk about the whys and the hows, and seeing yourself where you want to see yourself and how we're going to get there. That's what we talk about. Because if we just focus on just the domestic violence part, yeah, we could talk about that all day. But let's talk about how we're going to be a survivor. I try not to even call my clients victims. They're not victims, they're survivors.
Yep.
Because they are, and anytime that you are blessed to get out of a domestic violence situation, you are a survivor. It's just that simple.
Wow.
Make it out.
Wow. That's amazing. It's really powerful. So it's about mindset. You're saying it's about you're focusing on, you had a mindset shift during counseling. She also helped you see a different vision for your life and what you could be and what could happen for you. Wow. And you're doing it now for your clients. So that's amazing. What about, I want to just kind of hone in on the point that you said your mom was your first abuser. You felt like it really was childhood trauma that kind of left you vulnerable when you did become in the relationship with your son's father. And so that is where your mindset started. Is that kind of what you're saying? The broken mindset started in childhood.
Yeah, because when I realized it, and I forgive my mom. I talk about forgiveness in the book too. That's the first 2 chapters. You got to forgive other people and you got to forgive yourself. I forgive my mom. I forgive my mom because I just know that wasn't where she was at, and she did the best she know how. But at the same time, I'm still not in that place anymore. Yeah. And when certain things still happen, my mother still is 67 years old, still going through stuff. And when we had the recollection of certain things that happened in the past, and we tried to address things, there was still things that was happening, and I was an adult. And so, in the time of writing a book, I'm like, how is this still happening to me? And I'm writing a book about, violence. Yeah. And I had to realize this was already carried on from my generation. This was something she experienced domestic violence with our fathers. And her mother experienced domestic violence, and hearing the stories. And even though I didn't see it, my mother experienced it, I experienced it with my mom. You get what I'm saying? So like I said, with the emotional and the mental, being neglected, because I was the quiet child and I was the good child, and she had 6 kids. My mother had 6 kids. So 2 of them, my 2 older brothers and sisters, was more paid attention to because they was more what they call bad, back in the day. So she like, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. I was the straight A student. I was the one that's getting the good grades. You're fine. And ended up becoming neglect. Because it ended up becoming, I was very quiet at the time. I was a very quiet child. I was very under my mom. I was actually a mama's child. I wouldn't go nowhere without my mom. And the abuse became normal. So it was like, I knew my mom loved me. But at the same time, it was more like, that's my mommy. I was a mama's girl. I really was. Anybody that know. And so when I became an adult, and I'm talking about legally just 18, everything just blew up, right? Yeah. So it was more of everything that I was holding in as a child, that the neglect, things that didn't happen, things that she didn't pay attention to, things that happened to me that she couldn't talk about. And also, part of my life when I was young, she was an alcoholic too. I experienced that until she gave her life to Christ later. But parents and my mother was an alcoholic and abusive and things like that. I got 18, and all that anger that I thought, I'm just being quiet, and I was that angry person that everybody's talking about. So it was like, why is she so angry? She used to be so quiet and such a good child. And it was like, everybody started saying, we return. But I didn't realize that at that time. I didn't understand why I was so angry. And then when I ended up starting writing a book and things was happening, and we know that when things come up, and like I told you, those triggers and those traumas, I seen myself literally at that moment being a child again, crying, so hard. And I was in the midst of writing this book, and I was like, I don't know why this is happening. And I remember my aunt telling me, you are not a child. You are a grown woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you are not that person. You were. And then I remember my sister said the same thing because I'm telling them the situation. It was like I literally felt like felt like a child at 36
Yeah.
years old. But it was the same stuff that was happening to me. And I said, this is why I accepted it so long. And that's what the click came.
So this is amazing. I know in your book, and I want you to talk a little bit more about your book, but I know in your book you talk about support, and it seems like you're saying that some of your process to changing your mindset, to healing, and to starting over after abuse, it included the counseling. That was a huge part of it, the support that you got at our agency, but then also this process of writing. It seems like just the process of writing itself helps you get to the root, even deeper to the root causes of what had happened. So I think in terms of just thinking about those that are in the healing process and starting over, would you say that journaling or, in addition to counseling, is journaling?
Yes, that's so funny you said that.
Okay.
Not to cut you off.
Yeah, no.
It's so funny because one of my assignments, or what I have my people do, my clients do.
Yeah.
I actually have them journal. And one of the first assignments, because I told you, is about forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first assignments is you writing a letter. I did it. I could actually show it to you. I wrote a letter to my mom.
Wow.
And I wrote a letter to myself.
Okay.
I went away to a hotel. You don't have to, but I did. And I went away to a hotel a little bit after this happened.
Okay.
And I said, I had a spiritual mentor at that time that was telling me, he said, you gotta, just because you're writing a book don't mean you gotta be in the perfect space.
Yeah.
And because I was feeling that drawback as a kid was coming back, like, I can't do this,
Yeah.
And he said, no,
yeah,
I need you to write a letter to your mom.
Yeah.
And literally, and I was like, write a letter. And he said about the forgiveness that you're talking about that you want from your mom. And I'm telling you, when I did that, and I'm talking about, I wrote everything. It's probably like 2.5 pages. I didn't have to give it to her.
Yeah.
I literally did not have to give it to her. He said, you can or you can't.
Okay.
And I wrote a letter to my mom about why I was hurt. I wrote a letter to her about what she did and addressing the issues. And it was a release that I never had. So now I can tell you, and my mother talk every day. We starting to talk about issues, and she's actually acknowledging. She sees me for who I am now. Tells me how much she's proud of me. And this was just within the last year.
Wow.
And, because even though I didn't give it to her, I had to release it. I had to forgive her, because sometimes forgiveness will hold on to you that it will create so much health issues. You can't forgive the person that did whatever they did to you. Yeah. And then sometimes, like I said, I wrote a letter to myself. I forgave myself. I forgave myself for the times that I felt like I should have spoke up. I forgave myself for the times that I felt like, oh, I put myself in that situation. No, things happen. You got in a relationship. Okay, that's fine. I forgave myself for saying, oh, I should have been insecure, because a lot of times we don't forgive ourselves either. And so one of my first 2 assignments is you writing these letters, and it's such a release because you will start realizing things. Yeah. They start coming back to your memory. And then another assignment I have later on down the line with the change and evolving is the journal. I want you to see yourself where you at right now and why you think you need to change. Name 5 things that you would say negative about yourself, and then name 5 things that would counteract those negatives and why you're not that person. Wow. And everything that I have, honestly, that I have my clients do, I've done. And that's the reason why I only can speak from experience. I can only speak from what I've seen. Because I knew I didn't want to be in that situation again. I knew that I didn't want to be a bitter person. I knew I didn't want to be an angry person. I knew I didn't want to be talking to people and I'm still angry about everything and everybody. Like, she just so offensive on everything. So this is amazing. How did your doing this work impact the marriage then? How did it? So marriages work. after the third separation, like I said, it don't take 3 separations, but I was hitting against the prick. I tell people if I was to relate to anybody in the Bible, it's Moses, because I come on hitting against it. But after the third time, and my husband decided to get back together, I honestly knew who I was, and I knew who I wanted to be. I also set boundaries for my relationship, because a lot of times I talk about that in the book, that we don't set boundaries, regardless if you're in a relationship or friendships or anything.
Right.
You just allow certain things. And when you talk about boundaries, talking about those non-negotiables, what I will accept, what I want to accept. I also, because I have 2 kids, wanted my kids to see the positive. My son, when I wrote the book, and me and my son's father, we have a relationship now. And that's 13 years ago. So like I said, I had to forgive him. We got a great relationship, takes care of his son.
Right.
But we had to have that conversation. I'm writing this book and just letting them know that, and he was okay with it, because he actually got the healing that he needed to get. So let my son see, even though his mom and dad wasn't together, and talking to my 13-year-old son at that time, 12, your dad is the one that did this. And then the trauma that he's seen between me and my husband, because after 3 separations, of course that's trauma.
Right.
Because that was his stepfather. That's a father. We don't call him stepfather. We call him just his father or whatever. That's the father that came into his life. That's trauma too, because he's been doing it since he was 5.
Right. Wow.
And so after the third separation, it was more like, you got to get it together, because where do you want to see yourself with your children? My focus became off of just me and about who I was raising. Do you want your daughter to be in an abusive relationship? Do you want your son to be in an abusive relationship, or be the abusers? Because a lot of times we don't think that our kids they're going to be in an abusive relationship. They become the abusers because of what our actions are and what they're seeing.
Yep.
So that's where it led me in my marriage to say, okay, regardless if I was at the point where, even if me and my husband did not get back together, I needed the revelation and the change and the mindset and the evolving. I needed to change, because I knew that I had a stronger calling on my life, that I wanted to help other people. I just knew that for point blank period, that I wanted to help people be overcomers and don't go through what I went through, because it doesn't lead you nowhere but more trauma if you could prevent it. And so when it became off of me of pointing the finger of, well, he did this and he did that, and it became about Reba.
Yeah.
Who is the person that Reba is? Who do you want people to see when you walk in down the street or you encounter people? And you know how we sometimes encounter people, we call them heaven angels or sent angels. It's like they have a beacon of light on them. That's who I wanted people to see me be, regardless of with my husband or not. I just really wanted to be healed.
Yeah.
And so that's where it led me to get my relationship stronger with Christ. I also put up boundaries. We also talked about the boundaries we have to have for our marriage and for our kids. It also led us to have the relationship we had, because at the time we was in church. We're still in church, but we're in a different state now. Our home church that we went to church together, we had to have those relationships of the people coming in and holding us up, because you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And it's an island. So I had to have that support to hold me up and say, you can do this.
Yeah. I love this. I love what you're saying, because it gives us a realistic picture that there's no magic button to push. Even after you've left the relationship, right? Even after you've gone to counseling, you've been in a transitional home, you've grown so much, there was still some work to do. Later, when you wrote the book, more things came up. The marriage was not just a piece of cake. You guys had to really work it out. You had to figure out who you wanted to be, regardless of what happened with the relationship. And you had to, it sounds like you said it, you used your children as a huge motivating factor in all of it, making sure that you kept in mind what the impact was on them. And so there was more work to do. It was, and then you had the community. I always say too, it takes a village, they say it takes a village to raise a child. I say it takes a village to keep a marriage together.
It does. It does.
So you guys leaned on the support of your community, and your faith community. So I think that those are huge lessons people listening to this interview can pull from right now if they're trying to think about what can lend itself to be more support for me. Where am I at in my process and in my journey? What other things can I do? Like drawing boundaries, like journaling, like maybe getting to the root issues that I may have. I think that's amazing. Let me ask you to just kind of give us an overview of your book, the title, and where people can find it. And then we're going to go to questions in the chat.
Perfect. Okay. So my book is called A Blessing in Disguise.
Okay.
And you can find it on Amazon, Kindle. But right now you can buy it from me if you want to buy it straight from me off of RivaBell.com. Okay. You can subscribe to my email list on there, and you also can sign up for my coaching program if you want to. But the book is pretty much a plan, and it's for domestic violence survivors on how every step, 10 steps that I took, actually 11 steps that I took to be an overcomer. Things, my personal story, different situations that happened to me and why I did what I did. And it's a step-by-step, beginning to end on what I did.
Okay. Okay, absolutely. That's amazing. So it's A Blessing in Disguise. You guys can find this book on Amazon. You can go to RivaBell.com. You can sign up for the coaching. And where else can they find it?
RivaBell.com and Amazon, Kindle.
Okay. It's on Kindle. Okay. Yep. Absolutely. So that's amazing. I know you said in the book you cover the forgiveness process, support, renewing the broken mindset, and then building right relationships. Those are the breakdown of what we can find in the book. So that's amazing. I got to get it. Angie, are there any questions now in the chat?
Yes, we do have one question. It states, Reba, if you feel comfortable sharing, what are some of those boundaries that you set with your husband that helped your relationship?
Yes. First, one boundary was a non-negotiable was arguing in front of our kids. If we have a debate, because you're going to argue, you're going to not get along. You're not going to agree on everything. Let's be real. In a relationship, marriage, whatever. Not arguing in front of our kids. We're still working on that. We're not perfect at it, but we get to a point where the trauma that we can go on with our lives, right? And say if the marriage doesn't work, but those traumas that you did, like I talked about earlier, I didn't see my mother with a husband, but I still had trauma. You get what I'm saying? And I carried it. So one of those boundaries was pretty much the respect that we had to have for our relationship. Another boundary it was personal for me, is because my husband always wanted to take care of me. And it was like he had this goal that he wanted to take care of me, but he also had a mindset at that time that I have to be the breadwinner and I have to be the man of the household, and it was fine and the provider, because spiritually they are. My husband is the provider, but I had to understand that I had Miss Independent in me at that time too. So I had to kind of let go of Miss Independent and put a boundary up that, okay, for myself, that I had to give him the leeway and the because I don't like to use control, but I like to say allow him to take care of me, because it was more of most of our arguments and our fights was I could do this and I don't need you and such. I was saying those things. And so it was those never words that we started putting up. Stop saying certain things. We had to stop saying divorce if you don't leave. And if you're going to leave, then I could divorce you. It was just, so we had to stop saying that. Another boundary I think we had, our family. Guys, if you are married and you have in-laws, and I love my in-laws, I call them in-laws. But because I married into a husband that was strong about his family, it was like they was involved in everything. And we had to put up a boundary that we was a team, that if it wasn't about us, every time we had an argument, every time we got into it, he leaves out the house and go to his parents' house. And it was just like, so we just gonna, keep on. And it was like kept involving them in our relationship. So that was another boundary we had to put up, that if we a team and we're doing this, it doesn't matter. We got married for us. We got married for Thomas and Reba. We didn't get married for everybody else. And we had to exclude family and friends from our relationship and our problems so we can actually build on us. And then I would say a last boundary we put up was, most importantly, we had to pray together, because we had to give our kids something that they didn't see when he probably seen it, but I didn't see it when I was growing up in front of our kids. We still pray together every morning before we walk out this door. As we know, tomorrow's not promised.
Yeah.
So that argument you having today ain't gonna matter if that man or that woman walk out that door and God take them home. Let's just be real. So we have to put a boundary up that we're gonna pray every morning. If they're gonna see, if you're gonna argue in front of your kids, you better pray in front of your kids. If you're gonna argue in front of kids, say you sorry in front of your kids. Just as big as that argument should be, that apology should be just as big. And keeping your family in that unit together to teach them that, yes, we're going to have differences. We're not going to have toxicity. We're going to have differences. It's okay. I teach my son now, it's okay to have differences. It's okay to have a different thought, because if we got along all the time, then that wouldn't be a great marriage. If we agreed on everything, then we'd be boring. That makes you independent. You're still an independent person aside from your husband or your wife. So I teach, I teach, not just teach, but I pretty much, the boundary part is keeping God in our household, the center of our household. So
that's amazing. So you guys had to figure out how to put up boundaries that safeguarded the relationship. And some different way to make sure that it worked for you guys based on your expectations and your needs in the
and the respect.
And the respect.
A lot of times we think that we just respect first because we with them, and it's just like, no, you don't. We had to realize that we didn't have a respect for each other. Let me be me and let you be you, and then other things will fall in place. You respect my opinion and what I want to do, and I respect your opinion, what you want to do, and then we come together. Most 9 times out of 10, do you find out y'all really just thinking the same thing? You're just saying different things, or whatever. And I always found that out, but the respect level has to be there in any relationship. And I talk about boundaries with friendships, and we're going to talk about friendships. In the process of this whole pandemic, I lost 3 strong friendships of 20-some years. And I think it was more of, I say, not losing them, but God has separated us because I wouldn't be who I was and I wouldn't wrote this book. Okay. Sometimes we have trauma bonds. I talk about that in my coaching program, that we keep people in our lives for, and it could be another abusive relationship, but we have trauma bonds in our lives, that we keep people in our lives because of the negative things that we have in common. So we're just calling each other just to talk about negative things and what's not going on. And we're not talking about the future. We're not talking about the goals. We're not talking about positive things. You have to reevaluate that relationship and put your boundaries up and say, okay, I can give, say me and you talking, and I can say, I can give you advice. So I got some advice on this or whatever, and you give me advice. That's great. If we just negatively, I went through this today and I went through this today, and those are boundaries that you got to put up in your relationship to say, no, because sometimes all that overwhelms you and it makes you bad to a person that you don't want to be. So.
I hear you talking, and I see a person that's come a long, long way, done a lot of work from domestic violence happening, growing up in a traumatic home, to as knowledgeable and self-aware as you are right now, and intentional about your marriage and your family and your friendships and your boundaries. So I just want to say it's absolutely amazing. Like, I applaud you. And I also want to say, are you sure you're not going back to school to get this counseling license and open up? I just want to throw that out there, but you can just let that
maybe in the future.
Angie, do we have any other questions in the chat?
No other questions. Just thank you for sharing your journey and your story. Also, your website for your book has been placed in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. And so Reba, we're gonna wrap up, but I just want to ask you if you had any final words to share with someone that is either in it right now, in a situation or a relationship where they are experiencing any kind of abuse, and they want to leave, or they've already left and they're trying to start over. What words would you say?
The one that's in it, I would say, please notice the signs and get the help. As we know that it's domestic violence awareness month, and I know it's easier said than done because I was in it, and that it's just not that easy to leave. But please get the help little by little and try to get out of the situation, because there is help. There are services like there are services that will be confidential. These are confidential services. You don't have to tell anybody, and they will set you up to leave right away, and you could feel comfortable. I know it's harder when you got kids, because I know the two things are for people to leave, harder to leave is finances and kids. So I would say, think about those kids if you do have kids, and where you want your kids to be in the future and what you want them to see. Because 9 times out of 10, because we think they don't know, they know. Kids feel it. And that's what the adverse childhood trauma comes from. People that don't have kids, but you're just in it, and maybe it's a financial situation. There are some financial support services that help you to get your life back on track. Budget. If you don't have a job, it's government support services. There are services out there, guys. So please get the help that you need. I would say for the person that's out of it, but you feel like, I just can't see myself starting myself over and I don't want to love again. Try to do a self-evaluation. I recommend therapy to anybody that before they even come to me to sign up, only because you can be in therapy at the time, but because, like I said, I'm not a counselor, certain things we have to dig deeper on. And there may be things we talk about, because there are things I talk about and I want you to do a self-evaluation that you may not be ready to address. And only therapy can help you with that. I would say get the therapy that you need, do the self-evaluation that you need. If you pray or meditate, I talk about prayer and meditation too. Whatever there is, try to find the person that you want to be. That would be my goal. And that's the goal of everything. Always see yourself where you want to be at, because nobody actually want to see themselves just depressed and sad and burdened and bitter and angry and distraught and just thinking negatives of themselves every day. See yourself where you want to be. And then after that, work on it bit by bit. I don't care if you just went to the grocery store every day and walk around the grocery store to release. I talk about that. To release the anger. Sometimes it's not a big boom. Okay, I turned around and I just turned my life. Like you said, this is 13 years, and I just gave my stories of things that's still happening to me. And I'm in therapy now. I'm still in therapy. I'm in therapy because of what I told you guys about the trauma. I have to deal with the triggers. I'm learning about my triggers on what would trigger me from my childhood that somebody would do, and not go from 0 to 10.
Yeah.
So I can't give you advice that I'm not doing. I'm in therapy now because of what happened to me months ago with my mom that made me cry like a little child, that made me go.
Bringing it's new levels and layers of self-discovery, and we're always growing. Yeah, absolutely. Reba, I want to thank you for being with us. You gave a wealth of information and so much insight, so much, I think, brought so much insight and strength and hope for people that will see this interview. So I just want to thank you. Thank you for your transparency too. This was very transparent. So we just appreciate you being with us. And thank you to everybody that's watching. Thank you, Angie, for doing the tech. And be sure to join us share this video, like it, share this video, and then make sure you're with us next Tuesday. Again, we'll be here, same time, same place, different tea. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a
Thank
good
you so much.